I'm just waiting for a few minutes while my video catches up. Got a new microphone today just for lives and Skype, so I'm just checking it. I have got my old one, but we'll see what this sounds like. I'm going to start today with something that I read. I had no idea where I'm going with this live. I am just going to sit here. So, when depressed, simply be depressed. Don't get depressed about your depression. When depressed, simply be depressed. Don't fight it. Don't create any diversion. Don't force it to go. Just allow it to happen. It will go by itself. How do you feel about that? If you suffer from depression or anxiety or any other type of mental health issue, do you feel like you're able to just allow the feeling to be, or do you find that you get depressed about being depressed or anxious about being anxious? And I think I probably do that. If I have a really long, lengthy anxiety bout, I start to get anxious about being anxious. And it's a kind of a self-perpetuating cycle that you get into. Now, at the minute, my mood's quite low. My energy is a bit low. I don't know whether it's just I've got so much on at the minute, and I'm also obviously a bit worried about my mum. She's going for chemotherapy tomorrow. So I guess you would say I've got kind of a low grade depression, and it could be an accumulation of just life experiences. And I came to my computer this morning and I thought, I wish I wasn't depressed. I wish I wasn't feeling low. And I really resisted it. I really resisted just embracing what is. And then I just looked at this quote by Osho where he says, when depressed, simply be depressed. I'm going to repeat it again because it's helpful for me too. So when depressed, simply be depressed. Don't get depressed about your depression. When depressed, simply be depressed. Don't fight it. Don't create any diversion. Don't force it to go. Just allow it to happen. It will go by itself. And the bit that really triggered me was the don't create any diversion. Now, how many of us try and divert our attention from anything that doesn't feel like joy, peace, happiness, whatever you want to call it, harmony? How many of us try and just distract ourselves? I don't even know what I just said. See, I'm totally diverting against my own thoughts right now. What I was trying to say was basically that we try and get away from the hard stuff, and we don't try and get away from the stuff that feels quite bright and light. Or maybe we do. Maybe we do. Maybe when we're in those great feeling places, if we suffer from depression or we have any kind of aversion to happiness or pleasure or things going well in our lives, perhaps we do diverse from those feelings. Perhaps we do try and get away. So therefore we then allow in depression or anxiety, because having those feelings for too long is scary, especially if you haven't had a lot of positivity in the sense in your life, a lot of ease and grace. And perhaps you had a long time where you've just felt depressed. And when you do have moments of joy or peace, you try to get rid of them fairly quickly. because you don't believe that they're going to continue. So I know I've done this. I tend to think, if I get a moment of happiness or things are going really well, there's that thought in my head, when will the other shoe drop? It's not going to last. So I think in a way, a part of me says, well, it's not going to last, so let's just end it now. I'm processing stuff as I'm talking here because I hadn't actually thought about it this way. I thought about it in terms of that we can be afraid of success and we can be afraid of failure, but I didn't think of it in terms of when we're in a good feeling place that if we're not used to that, we'll try and move that out of the way into the not good feeling place simply because we're not used to feeling that and we don't believe either that we deserve it or that it's going to continue. So why let it? Why allow it to continue? Now, everything changes anyway. We can't have peace, joy, love. We can't have that all of the time because if we had peace, love, joy, harmony all of the time, we wouldn't know peace, love, joy, or harmony. We need a contrast to be able to see what each feeling is. But as humans, we label them. That's the problem. We label peace, joy, harmony as positive, as a good feeling. And we label sadness, sorrow, grief, anger, rage, frustration as a negative or a bad feeling. So we, as Osho says, we create diversions to both move away from the positive into the what we term negative. But when we're in the negative, we try and get rid of or distract ourselves from feeling that feeling. And because of that, it perpetuates. And something that could have been perhaps a really deep feeling of sadness or sorrow that maybe would have only lasted 1 or 2 days. But instead we focus on the feeling and how much we don't want it and we try to get rid of it. And because of that, it can last a week to 2 weeks because we're perpetuating it by focusing on how much we don't want it to be there. And I think I've said this in the past, if you can see your emotions and feelings as small children, they're unwanted small children. Imagine you're going to an orphanage and there's a lot of children in their cots and cradles and they're all crying for your attention. And one of those children is really sad and that child is sorrow. Another child has a red face and is really upset about something and is just screaming at the top of its lungs because it's so angry. And there's another child that's whimpering in the corner because it's so afraid. Now that's anxiety. So we have anxiety, depression. We have so many different things happening, and those children are orphans in a way because we don't want to hold them. We don't want to comfort them. We don't want to see them as lovable or loved just as they are. And that is why they continue to cry, and that is why they continue to feel pain. Because they're not receiving the attention and the space to transform and change. And I said this recently on a podcast interview I did, the fact that depression and mental health issues, we've got into this feeling that this is who we are. It's an identity. And we've seen it as a wrong thing that we need to get rid of. Instead of seeing it as a deeply transformative experience. But the transformation comes when we're actually willing to let the feeling be and we don't fight against it. And we take those emotional children in the orphanage and we hold them into our hearts. And we give them the space and love that they need. We don't put them into our hearts to make them feel happier. We don't do it to make them feel peaceful. We do it because they deserve that love and that care, and we don't need to tell them not to be anything other than they are. And when we're able to take those emotional orphans and bring them into ourselves and really welcome them and not judge them as a thing that we need to create a diversion from, be it from overworking, from eating too much, to anything. And in a way, also introspection can be a diversion. I found that in my life, I have looked inwards to myself. And sometimes when you're depressed, especially, you look in too much. And that can cause us to feel like we're welcoming the feelings, but we're not actually. That's another diversion. You'll know when you're doing it. It's when you are feeling depressed and then you start to really wallow in it and you really think depression is a wrong thing and you are a wrong person for having depression. And that is when you take your introspection outwards and you start to look to other people and see how you can perhaps support other people even during your challenging emotional time. And that takes you from that deep introspection that maybe is too hard when you're suffering from depression. I'm just going to check the comments. And hi, Angela. Angela's a friend of mine locally in Gloucester. And Angela's saying that she's been depressed for a while and she gets annoyed or depressed about being depressed. Yeah, I know that, Angela. Not just with depression, but with anxiety. I got angry with myself for feeling so scared or really sad about feeling really sad. And as I said, that child in the orphanage, that emotional child that hasn't got a parent, because we are the parents of our emotions, is just sitting in that cot or that crib and is crying, and all they need is just to be held. And that's what we can do with depression and anxiety and fear and everything that comes up. Just hold it. And if you can't do it for very long, just do it for 5 minutes a day. But don't do it because you want to make that emotion anything other than what it is. And I know it's easier said than done. And I know that from my experience, I've tried to create many diversions to feelings and facing what arises for me. And sometimes I feel a bit of a fake because I speak about this and this inspiration comes through me, and then I may leave the computer and I'll go back to creating diversions and not welcoming these orphaned emotions that I haven't been parenting. And I want to be a responsible parent to myself, mother myself. And unconditional mothering, begins with just being there for that child, with no instructions, no guidance, no sharing